The Royals have one of their biggest moves of the offseason in bringing in Carlos Estévez on a 2-year deal. What do we make of it? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. It's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can also find us on wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. We're also on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're that first-time listener, well, you are joining at the very tail end of the offseason for us. We'll be back to 5 episodes a week coming up in mid-February. We'll be down there in Surprise, Arizona, giving you tons of coverage, tons of interviews, lots of good stuff coming your way in a few weeks. And we'll be back into the normal part of doing this show, which is always going to be 5 episodes a week. As for me, I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB, do a variety of things over there. But when you come to this podcast and you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started today. Well, unfortunately for us, yesterday was just all about timing when we did our episode. I'd gotten home from work. I thought it was a good time to do a little bit of an episode on the prospects in this system because there had been a top 100 just put out by Kylie McDaniel. I was thinking, there's no move that's going to be imminent. And obviously, as I hit the post button, about 15 minutes later, we get the breaking news from Jon Heyman that the Royals were signing Carlos Estévez, one of the top relievers in the market going into the offseason. And we find out a little bit later on it was a 2-year deal around $20 million, though I think it can be up to, a couple more than that. There is a player option included, so that third year could be around $13 million. So then I think it would come down to a 3-year, $33 million deal. But that's putting the cart before the horse. What we know right now is a 2-year deal worth around $20 million with some incentives involved. And this, to me, truly surprised me. Because when we're getting to this stage to the offseason, you're not really expecting some of those top guys that are still out there to be circled back to, right? It felt like the Royals had tried their luck with a few guys, but once you get to late January, early February, you might be better off just giving somebody a 1-year deal. And when I saw Tommy Kahnle hours before Carlos Estévez come off the market on a 1-year deal less than $8 million, I'm thinking, well, that was very affordable for the Royals, but considering where it seems like they want their payroll, they're not going to go much higher than that. And not only do they do that, they give Carlos Estévez another year in that deal. And this is no slouch of a reliever. In my opinion, this is not overpaying somebody. This is showing that the Royals are very serious about adding guys that are still high-level players on the market. I know the rebuttal to that would say, well, why not take that money and give it to an outfielder, right? They still desperately need an outfielder. And I guess my response to that would be, I don't think they liked anybody in the free agent market when it came to offensive players. If anything, which we'll dive into this in the second segment, if anything, it feels like this could be a domino effect where you bring in Carlos Estévez, you now pair him in the back end of the bullpen with Lucas Erceg. It gives you flexibility to maybe include one of those pitchers to bring in a bat like a Taylor Ward, maybe a much lesser name like Starling Marte. I know he's not a popular name, but I would say that he's one of the few guys we have some smoke around when it comes to the Royals being interested in a bat this offseason. We knew Jonathan India had smoke. That worked out. About a few weeks ago, we found out during the winter meetings that the Royals and Mets discussed a trade involving Hunter Harvey and Starling Marte. I'm not saying it'd be my favorite pick, but at least it's been put out there before. Who knows? Maybe Adolis Garcia, who was seen as kind of a trade chip, could be an option. but I keep now going back to Taylor Ward, and maybe the Royals weren't willing to part ways with a Chris Bubich or an Alec Marsh or an Angel Serpa until they got a deal like this in place. And this really stabilizes the back end of your bullpen. And I think if you go one step further, you could bring up the possibility that Lucas Ursig could move into what I believe would be his highest value role, not as the closer, but as the fireman, right? That in the highest leverage situation, you're going to Ursig. You can save a guy who's got over 50 saves in the last 2 years as your closer. I still think Ursig's going to get a shot at it, but I don't think it would be a bad idea to move Ursig into the role that I think best suits the Royals, which is if the 6th inning feels like the make or break inning, you can use Lucas Ursig. Where in the postseason and last year when Ursig came over from Oakland, you used him in the 6th or the 7th inning, you're scrambling for the 8th and the 9th. Now I don't feel like you'll be scrambling because Carlos Estévez is a proven closer, a proven reliever. You are not hoping for a bounce back year. He just had a career year with a whip that was under 1. If you want to compare that to Ursig, it was better than Ursig's. His ERA was better than Ursig. Those are just sort of the baseline numbers. Now, advanced data, advanced metrics, all of that type stuff. The edge goes to Lucas Ursig. But Carlos Estévez is a power pitcher. That fastball can run up anywhere from 96 to 99. I think he's got some devastating secondary offerings. He's got a slider that I believe is used as kind of that put away pitch. And then I think it's either a changeup or a splitter. I got to go back and look at some of the video that I'd compiled together. But some of that stuff is, I think, almost resembling Hunter Harvey's splitter. It looked like it from this video I was watching, but could also be a changeup. But I know he's got some very strong secondary pitches to pair with that powerful fastball. The walk rate, even though he throws incredibly hard, is above average. He does get hit pretty hard, but again, I think it's more so about location. I think when he locates it well, which the walk rate was down, but if he leaves it out in the middle of the zone, sometimes he's just trying to go power on power. It may not work out. But this was a guy that going into the offseason, I thought the Royals could make a play for because they had been interested in him in the past. But I thought they could make a play for him if it was going to be on a 1-year deal. But the further we got in the offseason, I just didn't have that sense that Carlos Estévez was going to be coming to Kansas City on a 1-year deal, less than $10 million. I mean, we had an episode dedicated to talking about David Robertson and Kenley Jansen and Kirby Yates. And you're asking yourself, are these guys even going to take a slight discount to come to Kansas City? Kirby Yates, we found that not to be true because he signs a 1-year deal in LA with the Dodgers worth up to $14 million. Kenley Jansen's still out there. We know the Royals aren't going to be in play on that anymore. And in fact, I don't think they're going to be in play on any more relievers, but surprise me. If you can remember, not just yesterday's episode, but I want to say Friday of last week, I was asked about when the next move was going to be made. And I said, I think it's going to come out of the blue. I don't think you're going to hear any smoke. I think it's going to be this one tweet that comes out there or breaking news where you had no idea the Royals had their radar on this player and they got a deal done. That's exactly what happened with Carlos Estévez. But the exciting part about this is I go back to about June of last year, and there was a noticeable problem with the bullpen. Yes, it was the swing and miss, which there wasn't any of it, but it was the lack of power guys in that bullpen, right? If you are trying to wiggle your way out of a jam where it's 2nd and 3rd and 1 out, you can't have a bunch of guys that are pitching to contact out there. And the Royals just unfortunately did. Will Smith is out there and James MacArthur and John Schreiber and Chris Stratton. As much as I like Schreiber is a 3/4 length, not quite sidearm, I would say, coming from the 3/4 slot. But he wants to pitch to contact. Now you run it up 95, 96 miles an hour. You can get the swing and miss with locating it pretty well. But Schreiber's going to pitch to contact, and he was the best reliever, the highest leverage reliever for the Royals. Now he gets to be slid into that sixth inning role permanently because they've got more high-powered guys in the back end of the bullpen. And then they got Ursig, and it pretty much changed everything. Harvey, I don't believe, was ever that healthy, so he didn't get the opportunity. But now you start to look at it, and there's an abundance of high-powered arms in the Royals bullpen. You have Estévez. You have Ursig. You've got Carlos Hernandez, who I believe is out of options, so now I expect him to be in the bullpen. And he had a really strong finish in August and September. I was really liking what I was watching from Carlos Hernandez. So Hernandez and his triple-digit fastball. Angel Serpa went from throwing 94-95 on opening day to 99-mile-an-hour turbo sinkers in Atlanta right before the postseason. That's the type of power you now have in the bullpen, and that's going to be able to get you out of a lot of jams. Ursig is still the best reliever in this bullpen, but I think on paper, Estévez is very much number two and very well could take the closer's role for Kansas City by opening day. Just because I think Estévez has a lot of closing experience and Ursig now has that flexibility to move around a little bit depending on when the highest leverage spot in the game is. But I love the deal. And now you look at the boxes that were supposed to be checked off by the Royals this offseason. You've got the on-base bat you needed for the top of the order. That's Jonathan India. All you had to do was trade Brady Singer. Number two, you wanted to make sure that Michael Wacha stayed in Kansas City. You got that done really at the starting gun of the offseason. As soon as that thing was popped off, Michael Wacha returned to Kansas City. You wanted to make sure that you got that swing starter, some starting depth, the number 6 guy. You got that in Michael Lorenzen, and then you wanted bullpen help, and you got that in Carlos Estévez. I thought it was going to be bullpen depth where you're bringing in some guys on minor league deals or one-year deals and having them compete in spring training. You've now got a legitimate 1-2 in the 8th and 9th inning in Lucas Ursig and Carlos Estévez. I believe Mark Feinstein on MLB.com going into the offseason had Estévez as the 18th best free agent out there. Michael Wacha was 16th. So inside the top 20, the Royals got 2 of those guys and acquired Jonathan India and got Michael Lorenzen. And now that last box to check is going to be the middle of the order bat to lengthen out that lineup. And great for us because that leads us into our second segment. I believe this could be a little bit of a domino effect where the Royals bringing in Estévez tells us now they could be more open to trading for that bat once again. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our title sponsor today in FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easier to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59, where we will once again see the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm sure I'll have plenty of picks going into next week over on FanDuel. This may be the segment that everybody wants to hear about, other than just a quick recap of Carlos Estévez coming to Kansas City. I think everybody's feeling pretty good on this Thursday morning because the Royals finally made a move. I know I'm happy because I'm able to talk about some new blood in the Royals organization, and we are now just a few weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting, and we're going to see Carlos Estévez down there. But I think this leads us into maybe a bigger question for the Royals with, of course, just a few weeks before the team reports. Are they still going to get that middle of the order bat? And now after this move, just a hunch I have, I'm more confident than ever that a deal is going to be done before the team reports. Maybe not before pitchers and catchers report, but I think before that first full squad workout on the Monday that we're going to be down for in Surprise, Arizona. It's just a hunch. I'm going off just speculation of this deal and why I think it makes a lot of sense now. I believe that the Royals have tried a variety of options through the trade round. I do not think they've hitched their wagon to one player and they're just waiting and waiting and waiting for that guy to become available. Oftentimes, other pieces have to be moved around and guys have to be brought in, and other free agent names have to fall off the board before a deal can be struck. And so I've thought about Taylor Ward. I've thought about Starling Marte. And really with Starling Marte, that might have just been a name that was floated out there, and it felt pretty even with Hunter Harvey and Marte. But Marte's making a lot of money. He's 36 years old. He's got bad defense. He's declining, and Hunter Harvey does have the upside, but you also could look at him and say, well, is there any guarantee he's going to be good or healthy next year? No, you're banking on him bouncing back. But Starling Marte would give you a slight upgrade, not much, but a slight upgrade over what you had in the outfield. Taylor Ward would be more of the guy that moves the needle. And so it brings me to this point where Estévez coming to Kansas City allows the Royals to be flexible with who they have. Right now, the bullpen, you can argue, is pretty crowded. Okay, you're going to have your locks in Erceg and Estévez and Schreiber and probably Daniel Lynch is my guess. And then you'd have Carlos Hernandez because he's out of options. Angel Serpa is there. Sam Long is there. And probably whoever loses out between Bubic and Alec Marsh. I might be forgetting somebody there. I want to make sure, and going back to my list, I'm not blanking on somebody that's pretty much a very reliable reliever in that bullpen. Yeah, I have Erceg, I have Schreiber, I have Serpa. Did I say Harvey in there? Yeah, Harvey's going to be in there. So maybe Chris Bubic or Alec Marsh is in the bullpen as well, depending on who wins that job out of camp. But now you think about it, there are a lot of options there. There's a lot of bullpen arms, and there's a lot of guys there, too, that would fill the same role. Daniel Lynch would fill the same role that Alec Marsh does for that bullpen. Angel Serpa, I do really like the upside now because of that 99-mile-an-hour turbo sinker paired with a pretty good spin rate on the slider that he has. But you have to think about what's more dire for your team right now. The Royals desperately need another bat, and preferably one that can play in the outfield. If you go that route of Taylor Ward, maybe trading somebody like a prospect with Alec Marsh or Hunter Harvey and Alec Marsh, or maybe if they really are trying to go big and get Chris Bubic in that deal, maybe you could give Bubic without having to give a prospect in that deal. These are all things that I'm sure the Royals are mulling over. But whereas 48 hours ago, I don't think you could have made that deal because you didn't really have a solidified back end of the bullpen. We had multiple segments and multiple episodes talking about Hunter Harvey and the Royals' confidence in him bouncing back, my confidence in him bouncing back. But there is always that reality in baseball. They don't. Right? We would like to talk upside and potential and this and that and recapturing who you once were. It does not mean it's going to happen. It's not always sunshine and rainbows and, you can point back to, well, he was hurt, he was injured. And I'm not trying to change my tune on Hunter Harvey. If he stays in Kansas City, then I do believe that he's going to have a great opportunity to stay healthy and look like the old Hunter Harvey because the stuff is there. But I've also fallen victim to believing in MJ Melendez every single offseason and looking at the steamer projections and the FanGraph projections for what he could be. And, he just needs a little bit of this and that, and it's going to work out. But it hasn't, right? It hasn't really come close to working out. So now with the Royals making this move, you have two proven guys at the back end of the bullpen. And then you got Schreiber for the seventh. You got Sam Long out there. Carlos Hernandez, I think, is kind of entering a good stretch again of his career. Daniel Lynch showcased in September he can be a weapon in the front part of the bullpen. I was about to say the back end. He has pitched in the later innings before, but I think he's more so suited for long relief, going multiple innings on days that the bullpen's pretty taxed. But Alec Marsh, right? He might be one of those guys where you go, Are we getting the most out of him when we already have a long reliever and you'd also have Angel Serpa who can go multiple innings? Somebody feels like the odd man out. And if you're trying to acquire that middle of the order bat, I think it makes more sense to subtract from the bullpen, where now it feels a little bit more crowded, than it does trading away somebody in your lineup. Like Michael Garcia's name has been floated out before, and I know people have asked about Michael Massey. I don't know why you look at that lineup and say, well, we need to subtract to bring in a big bat, right? If you could acquire Taylor Ward from the Angels for Michael Garcia or Michael Massey, I think you feel good about bringing in Taylor Ward, but then you're also subtracting from a lineup that needs help, especially at the bottom part of the order. In the bullpen, I kind of have faith that the Royals can find somebody to replace certain production, right? Let's say, for this example, this hypothetical, Angel Serpa is included in this deal. As much as it would pain me to see Serpa and that now 99-mile-an-hour sinker go to Los Angeles, I feel like the Royals could find production, and maybe even better production than what Serpa was giving you last year. And you'd be bringing in a bat that boosts your lineup a little bit. So this domino effect, I don't think it's too far-fetched. I don't think it is this, idea of, well, now this happens and the Royals are immediately going to start trading and they're going to get the biggest names out there. It's nothing like that. But I think when you see a move like this that almost goes against what I had believed the Royals were looking for at this point, it makes me think that sooner rather than later, a deal can be struck. Because these teams are coming up on really the end of the offseason. I don't want to say that in spring training you can't make deals, but a lot of GMs and a lot of owners out there like to have their team on the field by that first workout so they can have that camaraderie from the get-go. They are working out with coaches. They are getting the full workouts in. And that's something that JJ Picollo likes to have. And now that you see a deal like this, there's one more box to check, and that is the middle of the order bat. And I know that looking at my past Mailbag Fridays and all these questions, people were getting impatient. Why aren't they making any moves? Why are they doing this and that? And this patience, at least it showed last night, it has paid off. That they got a guy like Carlos Estévez, who was one of the top relievers, one of the top 20 free agents out there going into the offseason. And it's opened the door again, in my opinion, to make a trade. And the reason that they've been so patient this offseason is there were just less holes to fill. Last year, they needed to overhaul the bullpen and overhaul the rotation and add a bat and some bench bats. They did all of that, and they did it rather quickly, and it helped the team for the better. This year's team needs upgrades, but they needed them in like 4 or 5 spots, right? They needed help at the top of the order. They got that in India. They wanted to make sure they kept the top 3 in their rotation intact. They got that done with Waka. They wanted to have a swing starter. They got that in Lorenzen. They wanted bullpen help, especially in the back end, more power, more swing and miss. They got that in Carlos Estévez. Now that last box to be checked is the middle of the order bat. I think by signing Estévez, it opens that door to maybe have flexibility in trading one of those arms to bring in a bat to lengthen the lineup. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, what grade would I give the Royals right now in the offseason? There's still a few weeks to go before pitchers and catchers report, but what letter grade would I give them? I'll tell you next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. The last thing we're going to dive into here is the report card, the letter grade that I would give JJ Picollo and John Sherman, which is a few weeks to go before the team reports to surprise Arizona. There is a Royals rally this weekend at Kauffman Stadium. I was out there last year. It was a great time. Got to talk to a variety of players. This year, won't be able to. I'll be out of town. And that does bring me to my next point with Mailbag Friday. As I said in yesterday's episode, we're not going to be doing an episode dedicated to Mailbag Friday, but I'll be sure to put out a tweet either tonight or tomorrow morning. Send in your questions, and I'll have all of them answered by the end of the weekend. So if you have them on YouTube, I'll try to get to those as well. But on Twitter might be the best way to reach me. for this particular weekend because I'm not going to be around my laptop or YouTube, opening up YouTube very often. But Twitter, I'll pretty much have that at my disposal the entire time. So the grade we'd give the Royals, the grade we'd give J.J. Piccolo, and how they've fared this offseason. I think the first thing we'll address is that it has been a slow offseason. For the most part, it's been a boring offseason. And I appreciate everybody sticking with me and bearing with me on segments where we might be going back over the same thing or repeating an idea or a hypothetical or projection. Last year, it was easy to have an entire offseason of coverage because the Royals felt like they were signing everybody, or it felt like the Royals were signing somebody every single week. There was something to talk about, and there was a lot more hype around the organization because for the first time in a long time, they were making moves. And I gave them an A on their report card because they weren't really in a position to spend, but they did so anyway, and they won 86 games, won a playoff series, and went to 4 games in the ALDS. Now the pressure starts to mount because fans are going to expect, at bare minimum, that. They're going to expect you to get back to the postseason. They're going to expect you to win over 85 games. And in fact, some people out there are going to expect a little bit more, winning the division, winning 90 games, getting to the ALCS. And when you have those expectations, you get flustered, you get frustrated when you don't see that team being as aggressive as you're kind of thinking. You know, when you are an aggressive thinker for the offseason, you see these deals happen and you go, why can't that happen? The Royals had the money to go out there and get Jerks and Profar, and I'm not going to fight back on that. I think they did. But what I've tried to do this offseason compared to last offseason is really listen to what the front office has to say. And the front office, really from the beginning of November, has hinted at making trades for the bats and then seeing how the market falls for pitching. Worked out with Lorenzen. It's worked out with Estévez. But when you have less boxes to check, you're going to have the more patient approach. You're going to have a slower approach. And I think it got misconstrued with being lazy or just being cheap. Now, they still have to go out there on the field and build a better winner than they did in 2024. And I think they feel like some of these pieces are going to help them in doing that. But a part of the reason I wasn't as stressed out with the inactivity, the quietness from Kansas City was that a lot of other teams in baseball were being even slower than the Royals. I mean, the Twins have not made a move this offseason. Not a notable one, right? Cleveland has made some moves. They've also subtracted. They took out 2 starters from last year's team and traded them away in Andres Jimenez and Josh Naylor, right? Detroit, they've signed Alex Cobb and Tommy Kahnle. I think 2 good fits for the Tigers, but they're still waiting to make moves for the offense to bolster that lineup a little bit. And the White Sox, they've maybe been the most aggressive in the Central and bringing in guys on 1-year deals. I look at somebody like the Padres. The Padres are a team that have to battle it out with the Dodgers in the NL West, that have to battle it out with the Diamondbacks, who were in the World Series 2 years ago, who have to battle it out with the Giants, who went out there and brought in Willy Adames and have added a couple different pieces to that team. And the only player they've signed is Elias Diaz. So the Padres of all teams have been pretty quiet in the free agent market and the trade market. So these things kind of combined together made me take a step back and go, all right, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to criticize them, but it does mean I'm just going to wait until they finally show up to camp. And at that point, I can truly evaluate what that team is going to look like. I can give my projection. Because in spring training, I'd imagine they can bring in somebody on a 1-year deal, maybe a bench bat. I could certainly see that this year, considering they're still needing to replace Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson. But if they bring in that middle of the order bat and it's a Taylor Ward type or somebody we're not talking about just yet, I think you'd be pretty satisfied with how the offseason went. They checked all the boxes they needed, and really nobody they brought in was met with, that's a terrible move. That makes no sense for the Royals. Jonathan India, for what they gave up, made sense for the Royals. Joey Weimer did as well, just as a fourth outfielder. Michael Wacha made a lot of sense to go out there and give a 3-year deal. Michael Lorenzen made a lot of sense as the swing starter. And Carlos Estévez makes a lot of sense for the back end of the bullpen. Right now, I'd give it a B+, because I think they have addressed some pretty significant areas, and they're trying to run it back with the same group they had in that rotation, minus Brady Singer. The bullpen, I think, is head and shoulders better than where it was last year. That's going to be able to win you a lot of baseball games. But the only way this grade can get to an A is if they bring in a legitimate middle-of-the-order bat, because as we've discussed, this team did not make it to the championship series because their offense wasn't good enough to compete with New York. You add one more bat to that lineup, and you pair it with India, Bobby Witt, Vinny Pasquantino, Salvador Perez, a healthier Hunter Renfroe. There's 6 guys right there that you feel pretty good about, and then you're just hoping one out of the 3 between Melendez, Garcia, and Isbell can turn in a career year. That's what you're banking on. But again, give us your thoughts on Carlos Estévez. Give us your thoughts on what you think the next move can be, and maybe give us your grade as well, where you're at when it comes to the job that J.J. Picollo and John Sherman have done this offseason. All right, that's going to do it for our final episode of the week here on Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I will be sure to put out a Mailbag Friday tweet tomorrow, and even if there is a move or two to be had over the next few days, unfortunately, I will not be back until Sunday night. If a move is made, we'll have an episode on Sunday night. But if not, I plan on doing one Monday evening or maybe early Monday morning, just so I don't go multiple days without running any Royals content for you guys. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.